Hi guys, Mrs. Rother here. I am at a committee meeting at our district office this afternoon, so I wanted to create a lesson plan where you would still continue on learning about the Articles of Confederation. So welcome, happy Monday. Hopefully you enjoyed that Monday Fun Day video featuring our very own Sarah Knight. And as you can see from the daily agenda slide, we're going to keep working on those Articles of Confederation like I mentioned. To do that, we're going to quick finish up that seminar. We got almost done on Friday, but not all the way, so we're going to quick finish that. And then you have a purple reading that you're going to underline some key things on, and I'll talk about that, and then give you some time, to work on your study guide. So those are those three main things that you're going to do today. So as we transition here, why don't you go ahead and get out your notes from Friday, the ones that are called Articles of Confederation. You'll know they're the right ones because we were talking all about weaknesses and the different weaknesses that the Articles of Confederation had. Remember that when we talked about the Declaration of Independence, that was the breakup letter. That was the we're out of here, England. We don't want it anymore. And now we're on to the government system that the colonies tried to set up, or now the new United States of America tried to set up, called the Articles of Confederation. And they were really, really weak. And on Friday, we were going over all those weaknesses. And what I had said was write down the things that sound the most weak, the most challenging to you. Do a little bit of judgment, do a little bit of evaluating. And remember, if you're afraid you're going to miss something, this presentation will be an Empower. So if you're worried that you're not going to write down the right things while you're judging and evaluating, you will be able to go back to this presentation and use it like a document. What you see on the screen in front of you now are the last couple of pieces that we talked about. And I think one of the big things that we all agreed upon, by the end of class on Friday was that not having a president was a huge, huge weakness. That seems like a pretty major thing to leave out of government. And so this slide that's up right now is where you left off. So again, you should have your notes out and be ready to move on. Here are the next two pieces. And again, I think both of these are really, really important and show the weakness of the Articles of Confederation. The first is that there was no national court system. There was no Supreme Court. There were no national judges. So even if somebody did something wrong, there was no way to put them on a trial. There was no way to do a hearing. There was no way to really enforce the laws that Congress made. So no Supreme Court, no president, just a Congress. Again, just another really powerful example of how very, very weak this Article of Confederation was. And then the other piece was they did not give the federal government any right. They, meaning again the founding fathers of our country, when they wrote the Articles of Confederation, did not give our founding fathers any rights to collect taxes. So remember, they had a huge debt after the war. They had to try to rebuild the new United States of America after the Revolutionary War. No tax money, no income, no way to improve society. So economic weakness as well as a leadership weakness. Now, it's easy to maybe say, well, they were a new country. They didn't know any better. Hopefully you'd find this to be pretty surprising that they did this on purpose, right? Like we wouldn't assume that somebody would create weakness on purpose, but they genuinely wanted a weak government. And the next slide will explain to us why they wanted to do that. So you have to remember what they knew. What they knew was the life of King George, or the leadership of King George. And he was acting like a dictator, right? He was allowing soldiers to live in their homes and kick everybody else out and take whatever they wanted. If soldiers were committing murder, all right, as long as they were doing it in the name of King George, and that was fine, right? Like all these terrible things are happening. Way too many taxes. They had to sell anything they grew for cheap, cheap prices, ship it overseas. It came back, and then they had to pay huge prices. Like, again, the money issues, the leadership issues, they were sick of it. So when they created their government, they wanted to make sure they did not create a King George situation. They were afraid that if they named a president, the president would start acting like King George. So, no president. They were afraid the national government would start taxing too much like King George was taxing. So, no taxes. So every single thing they did was to avoid another situation like what they had lived through and what they had experienced. So that's why they made weaknesses, because they didn't want to create or recreate another King George situation. So everything here is really important. Like I just said, this idea that they didn't want a King George situation, they were afraid of central government, so they were afraid of national government. Remember, each of the 13 states could kind of do their own thing and act like a little country, but they did not want one big overall huge government controlling everything. So that's an important thing to know. Each state was going to be independent, kind of do their own thing, as I mentioned. And the whole point, was to make sure that each of the states had their own absolute power, that each state had their sovereignty, is the word for it. But like I said, that's just this idea that each and every state is going to act like its own country. So at this point, if Mrs. Kramer needs to press pause so that you can get these notes taken, that's great. Otherwise, like I said, it's in Empower, and you can always look at them later. The next piece is with your pod. I'd like you to have a quick conversation. And what I'd like you to do is look at this political cartoon, and based on what you know about the Articles of Confederation, explain this political cartoon. What do some of the things mean? What does the title, Rough Sailing Ahead, ? mean? Making sure that you realize that that's a question there. And just kind of have a quick conversation that explains that political cartoon. Because if you'd never studied the Articles of Confederation before, this political cartoon might be pretty confusing. So how would you explain it to someone? All right, now that you've had a little time to do that, the next thing that you're going to do is read through this purple sheet. And there are two things, and maybe Mrs. Kramer can write these two things up on the board. There are two things you're going to pay attention to. Again, reinforcing things that we've talked about in the seminar. So what were the weaknesses? So underline anything in here that sounds like a weakness of the Articles of Confederation, and then why were they so weak? So why did they write them to be this way? Again, main things that we've talked about today and on Friday, but you're just going to reinforce it on here. Remember that we all think, process, read at different speeds. So if you get done quickly, the next logical step would be to open up the study guide, which you have access to. And remember, we've been working on it along the way. And so you can take a look at the green question. Again, this is whether you're on the Extend study guide or the regular study guide, the MEETS level study guide. Take a look at that green question. As always, they're very layered and have lots of different parts, but you can work on your green question, which the seminar notes will help you, and certainly this purple reading will help you as well. So you can work on both of those things for the time that you have left, reading the article and doing the study guide. And that's it. I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.